So let's go ahead and break down then, if we can break it down. So if so where should a youth pastor start when they're thinking about adding volunteers to their team? And if you could break it down from maybe a small church, you're talking about 100 people or less, then you got your mid-range people, maybe 350, 250, 350 to 500 maybe, or maybe 500 and above is probably the upper length there, but 500 above. But if you could break down what that would look like from a small church, medium church, and a larger church.
Yeah, and the good news is actually what I teach in the book and what we use at our church is the same. It's the same regardless of church side. The math is different, right? Because the numbers are larger, but the process is the same. And so, I mean, I can try to quickly walk through what I talk about in the book.
Oh, please
Again,
do.
there's lots of ways you can recruit volunteers, but one of the things that I like is having a consistent, repeatable process where you could basically be recruiting all year long. Now, are you actually recruiting every single week? No. But when I talk with church leaders, I ask how many hours a week do they spend recruiting? Most of them say 0. So that's obviously a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when I say most, I mean like 80% plus say 0. And then some of them say 1 and very few say 2 or more hours a week. So the book outlines a 5-part framework. All it is 5 steps. Like, how do you start with people who aren't serving and then basically invite them to take a step and then another step and then another step, knowing that it's almost like a funnel in sales or something like that, where you're going to put a bunch of people in the top, only a fraction of them are going to take the next step and only a fraction of them are going to take the next step. So the way we talk about it in the book and in our courses with Ministry Boost is, if you need to recruit, let's say you're the small church and you need 6 volunteers, you need 60 prospects. You need 10 times, 10x is the number. That's where some of the math is in the book. So however many volunteers you need 10 times that number of prospects. And prospects are just people who could serve, meaning they're not serving anywhere else right now, but that's it. We haven't qualified them any other way. We haven't put them through a vetting. You don't have to know them. They're just people that could serve. And when I work with smaller churches on this, a lot of times they'll say, like, I've had a church say, I need 13 volunteers. That's 130 prospects. My church only averages 130, and they're like, something's not going to work in the math here. And we could spend a long time talking about this, but my quick answer to that is, well, if your church averages 130, there's probably at least 200 people that call that church home that come regularly, at least, once or twice a month, maybe even 300, now that in pandemic. Now, the smaller church is usually the better the frequency of attendance is. But so, like, when you think, oh, there's only 130, there's not really only 130, there's probably 200, maybe even 300. So your church database is your friend here, even if you're in a larger church. Church databases are never church leaders' friends. Pretty much all of us hate our church database. And a lot of church databases aren't updated. But
Yes.
Ideally, what you would have is you would have your database would tell you who's serving. So then you could search for everybody who's not serving. That's some kind of active. They're attending, they're in a group, they give, whatever. And so, like, if you needed 7 volunteers, and so then you need 70 prospects, ideally you'd be able to search in your database, get 70 people who aren't serving, and the way we teach it in the book is you email them. And you email them and you can invite them to either a conversation or straight to an orientation, like a volunteer orientation. And when I say orientation, a lot of people will probably think about, like, after somebody has said yes to serving, we're going to give you, we're going to give you your orientation. Like, if you get a new job, the orientation's after you've gotten hired. We kind of use the term orientation for like a sneak peek, a preview before you've said yes. In fact, the orientation is like a sales pitch almost. It's like, here's what student ministry looks like at our church. And, here's the core principles about it. Here's why we do what we do. Here's how it works. Here's the different volunteer roles you can serve in. And then you tell stories about life change. You know what I mean? Like, last year we baptized 27 students. 18 of those were baptized by their small group leader. Like, like whatever that is.
Right.
And so for us, the orientation is a vision pitch. So you email this list, and here's how the math works. If you email 70 people, 70 prospects, I don't know, maybe you'll get 12 back, if that, the first time, maybe even like 6, 7. Like, sometimes it's not a lot. That's why you need so many prospects.
Yeah.
And then I teach that you email again the next week, everybody who didn't reply, and you'll get another 6 or 7, so you might have heard from like 13 people, let's say, out of 70 at this point. And then we do teach, if you still need to, you can always send a text another week later. So you've sent 2 emails and a text to these people, inviting them to a conversation or straight to an orientation. And hopefully you'll get 10, 12, 15 of them to reply. And at that point, you're talking and you're here, you listen to them, their story, how they find their way to your church, how's their faith journey going, what's their experience been like. And obviously, if you know them, you're adjusting this a little bit, right? I'm not like, hey, Paul, I'm Nick, and it's just all generic. You know what I mean? Like I'd be like, hey, Paul, how you doing? How was that trip you were taking a couple months ago?
Yeah.
Hey, wanted to catch up and talk about some things. Like my normal email, if I don't know you, would be, hey, Paul, I'm Nick, one of the pastors on staff here at CCC. I would love to meet you and hear about your story and how you found your way to our church. I'd also love to hear about how your experience has been. Could we chat for 15 minutes before or after a service this Sunday? What do you think? Right. And then if you don't reply, like if you're one of the people that don't reply, the next week I usually do a little hack because I'm sending this through a mass email thing through our church database.
Right.
But you don't have to do it. If the numbers are low enough, I would encourage you to send them manually, like individually. But if it's large scale, and I do a little hack where I make it look like it's a reply to that first email, put a little RE in the subject and include the original below. And it works. Like in most email clients, it works. And I just say, hey, Paul, want to know if you saw my email below. Would love to talk this Sunday. So like I do that next week if you don't reply.
Right.
And then of course the text is another thing. And so once you do that, you're getting, I mean, the whole point is get in a conversation with, if you need 7 volunteers, try to get in a conversation with like 15 of them. Like try to get in a conversation with more than 7, certainly.
Yeah.
Because again, not all of them are going to be, want to serve. And for some of them, serving is not going to be their best fit. Like the way I say it is, this is where we pastor them. It's not just about recruiting them. We want to help them take their best next step. And that could be serving in youth ministry. It could be getting in a small group or getting in a care group. Somebody tells you just went through a divorce and you're like, you know what? We've got divorce care starting up in 6 weeks. I think that'd be a great place for you to go. It could even be serving in another ministry. That, if we be the team player and put our church-wide hat on, you're talking with somebody. It's like, sounds like you would really love elementary. Let me introduce you to our children's pastor. So, and in a perfect world, church staff are all doing this together and they're helping each other kind of thing, and our church has done that. And it's great. I mean, we just had a meeting the other day where we, it was a little tense moment where like one of the best elementary volunteers was being recruited by student ministry, but wanted to be recruited by student ministry. So like now turns out actually at that meeting last night, we found out he's not going to go to student ministry. So my kid's pastor was very happy, but that's happened, it happens all the time. And so anyway, so that's kind of the most of the framework. You reach out to them. They're just prospects at that point. You get them to a conversation, invite them to an orientation where you cast a vision for like, this is why you want to serve in student ministry, and this is the difference it makes. And after that, you're just onboarding them and placing them. But that number of 70 in the beginning, you only hear from 15, maybe 10 of them say yes to come into the orientation, and you get 9 of the 10 to serve. And now you got 9 new volunteers when you were looking for 7. If your church is larger, the numbers just go up, right? Like you needed 23 volunteers, and so you need 230 prospects or whatever. We just my business partner Kenny Conley and I just worked with a church in Colorado, large multi-site church. I think they have 30 staff just in kids and students across all their campuses and things. And we taught them this process, and it was really cool because we had them tell us how many volunteers they need to recruit, and they have essentially like about 700 and some volunteers, and they need another 305. So they need to recruit 305 volunteers. And so we're like, y'all need 3,000 prospects. You know what I mean? Now their church is large, so that those numbers are there.
Yeah. Not just in attendance, but on their database, which I love because the several things that we've said here. It's like, how much time do you spend on recruiting? That doesn't mean like going up to at the pulpit and saying, well, how many times are you getting up there making a pitch to your congregation?
Yeah.
Everything here is, number one, have you looked at your database lately? Have you looked at your church database? That's part of recruiting, right? It's not just verbal going one-to-one to people. It's like not how much time do you spend in relational asking, but how much homework are you doing, right? Are you looking at your database, right? Are you emailing, then creating emails that are going to get people interested in what you're doing, creating an orientation meeting right? For people to come up. That's all part
Yeah,
of recruiting.
it
That's
is.
time. So if you
Yeah.
say you could easily spend 2 hours a week doing the things right here that you just said,
Oh yeah.
to create that. And the fact that I love also the fact that, listen, your role as a pastor is that these aren't just volunteers, these are people on a journey, and this is part of discipleship process, that you're helping them not just be a part of your ministry, you're helping them find what they need, because you're going to hear something in a conversation. I'm going through a divorce. I'm having, you're going to pick up on some things that maybe they're not healthy enough in a place for this, or they're not knowledgeable enough for something that you're asking them for, and you think that before they enter in, maybe this class would do them great. Maybe this. You'll also pick up in these conversations that, listen, maybe they're not the best fit for you, but they're a great fit for that other ministry in your church, because what you're hearing is, you really love this. You responded to the email out of mercy. You said, I want to help. But really where your heart is, you'd rather just be an usher. You just want to greet people. You want to talk to people. I think that's where, and that is such a great broad perspective, because so many youth pastors want, grab. I love the illustration of that basically everybody on staff is a headhunter, right? Everybody's saying, listen, we have pizza every week.
Yeah.
Whereas the children's ministry has candy.
Yeah.
So
What's your preference? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
That's right. What do you really want?
Yeah. What do you really want? Yeah. And in a perfect world, you're all helping each other.
Yes.
But if you just do this on your own, it is an advantage, quite honestly, because now all the prospects are yours. You're not, you know what I mean? You're not, you're not competing, especially student ministry. I always say that, like, our staff at our church know that I believe student ministry is the biggest volunteer commitment in the church. I mean, are there exceptions where, like, hey, this volunteer does 20 hours in this role? Sure. But just in general, student ministry is the largest commitment in the church. Therefore, it is the hardest thing to say yes to. So, like, my friend Kenny, who I mentioned, my business partner, he's always done these primarily just with kids and maybe with students. I have let our staff to do them all together, where our whole staff does it. He likes just having kids and students do it together, because sure, if you're doing orientations, it's way easier for somebody to say yes to serving once a month as an usher than it is 2 hours a week, 2.5 hours a week in student ministry, plus trips, plus, you know what I mean? Like, it's now part in our church, one of the things we kind of acknowledge is, well, if you're starting out serving, maybe something like a once a month on our guest services is the step for you. But we view that as a first serve opportunity, and most people, not all of them, but most of them aren't going to stay there forever. They probably do need to graduate, so to speak, into some other opportunities. So student ministry does need to recruit differently there, because I think it's good to have some, like, first serve opportunities in student ministry. Like, do you have a welcome team? I guess, do you have hospitality or food or events or something where it's, like, easy to serve right out the gate without much experience? But a lot of student ministry roles, and this is where I love student pastors, they're getting, in some ways, you got to get the best of the best, because you got people that need to be committed, leading students, showing up in their life at church and outside of church. And this process still works for that. I think what happens, though, is sometimes your prospect pool, you might already, like, limit it down to people you already are some level of committed, because the commitment level you're going to ask for is so strong that you start there. You may not just ask everybody. So that's just another tip to think about when it comes to student ministry specifically.